So, welcome everyone. I'm Alexander Mihalcea, and today we're joined by Mark Stringer, co-founder and CMO of Skoot Eco. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, Alexander. It's lovely to be here on this fine spring day in London.
Right. Before we dive in, could you give us a quick overview of what Skoot Eco does?
Yeah, Skoot Eco, we're a top 5% B Corp that really works with a host of different businesses to understand their ESG requirements. So, focusing on environmental, the social impact that they can make, and the governance, and helping them on that journey, regardless of where they are on that journey, to try and make it easy to make a positive impact on the world.
That's fascinating. And what inspired you to create Skoot Eco? Was there a specific moment or experience that sparked this journey?
I think, like most founders, possibly were unemployable. So, my business partner, I blame him, Greg Gormley. We'd worked together previously, and I suppose we were both looking for maybe to give something back to the world. We'd been relatively successful in the number of things that we'd done. And what we wanted to do, we had an idea, or he actually had the original idea, to have a social impact business whereby we were actually planting trees from a mobility app for every drive that you did, connecting people who drive with people who need lifts. And the business started there. And we realized that we not only did we want to connect people in need, but also to do good for the planet at the same time. And over the years, the business has evolved during that period to be much broader, to really focus on the E, the S, and the G rather than where we started, which was in mobility. But we learned a lot about understanding scopes and emissions by starting in mobility, which is obviously, I think most people know, is a big part of the emissions problem that we're faced with.
Right. And what was your background before starting this venture?
I'm a marketeer by trade. I have spent many years, I suppose, if I was critical of it, making people buy things they don't want or need. I'm quite good at it, but I started my career at Disney. So I know a lot about entertainment and fast marketing, building hype, building brands, getting excitement. And then sort of for the last 15 odd years plus, I've been agency side working my own marketing agency, helping businesses. We were founded out of Red Bull's offices, giving wings to ideas. And my background is really about, PR, influencer, experiential, building brands, getting people talking, getting people to fall in love, I
Right.
suppose, the emotional connection that you can create. And I have numerous different brands along the way. Some people would call me an entrepreneur. I would liken it to unemployable, which a lot of founders are.
Okay. So let's go back to when you first started. What major challenges or gaps did you see in the market that made you think this needs to be solved?
Yeah, I can look at it in two ways, really. So back in 2019, 2020, when the original idea was there, for us, the gap in the market was this idea of, I suppose originally it was Uber meets Red Bull in a social impact. So for us, there was this idea that um, the need state of people who want lifts and people trying to find their way to get somewhere, and the idea that actually you could be a social mobility app, but also you could be good for the planet. And I think that was the original idea because often it feels binary. You can
Mhm.
be a really good brand, or you could be really powerful and successful and a great brand, and they didn't seem to meet. And I think we wanted to be in that space. My background being in marketing and working with lots of those brands, and Greg's background being in tech and building tech, we saw that opportunity. We saw, I suppose, some of the disconnect that people were having in that space, and that was the original, I suppose, genesis of the idea. But if you remember back 5 years ago, uh, this week, I think it was, there was a small thing called lockdown that happened,
Yeah.
in London and the UK and then across the world. And I suppose there's only another person that I know that probably had the same time of challenge. And a friend of mine opened a hotel virtually the same week. But we were trying to persuade people to get into confined spaces in that period, whilst we were being told that we weren't meant to be together. So that was probably the biggest problem that we had at that time. But that I suppose, is how the business evolved, which I can talk more about.
Okay, that's really interesting. And could you elaborate on why the existing solutions weren't meeting these needs?
Yeah, so I suppose, we fast forward now and how the business has evolved. So we went from a B2C business to a B2B business. During that period, we evolved um, because of lockdown, and we became an errands app where people were self isolating and you could use Skoot to deliver things to your house. So there was a sort of a need. And then people were coming back to work. So we evolved into a B2B business, helping people get back into the office in a timely way in what was then, I suppose, a safer environment. And on that journey, what we began to hear more and more, and I suppose is where we are today, doing good, being an environmental business, being more sustainable, being cleaner and greener. God, that's really difficult. That's so complex. How do I do it? And because we were in mobility, people were talking about um, scope. Like I
Yeah.
remember hearing the term, people went, scope three emissions, they're really difficult. I remember Greg and I going, scope three emissions, Google scope three emissions. Yeah, yeah, they're really, really difficult. What are they? Being in transport, there are 75% of scope three emissions for a lot of businesses come from transport and commuting. And we were tracking the mileage, we'd know the cars. So people were beginning to say to us, well, you understand ESG, you understand environmental, you're planting trees, you're doing good, you understand scopes. And we're like, well, could you tell us what our scope three emissions are? So you've got it, you make it really simple. And that's what we kept hearing time and time again. This is so complex. I can't do it. I don't know what to do. My CFO's asked me to look at it. I don't. This is really complex, and that's what we still hear. But that's what we were hearing more and more. I know I need to do it, but I'm not sure how. And
Yes.
that's the problem that we've got. I think fundamentally in the ESG space with a lot of businesses, whether you're a small service-based SME or whether you're a large multinational, obviously much more complex. But there's a sense that it's going to be really difficult and really expensive and going to get in the way of my day-to-day job, because my day-to-day job is getting this product on a shelf. My day-to-day job is not to work out the carbon emissions. And a lot of people do not have ESG, environmental or social impact experts in their business.
Right, right, right. So I have a little curiosity of this. What are the main operational challenges companies face when implementing carbon reduction initiatives?
Yeah, I think you can look at carbon reduction, carbon removal, even across the social impact. I think if you believe all the research, the number one issue that consumers want brands to solve, nearly 70% will say, is around the environment. However, they're not, and they say they're prepared to pay more, but they're actually not. So therefore, what you end up with is a business saying, "I know I really need to do this, but it isn't my number one priority. My number one priority is, my cost of goods, my cost of sale, and like, how do I get that across? My number one is operationally, I have a big problem, and from a marketing and sales perspective, I have a problem. And somewhere in the middle, there's this environmental and social issue that people are wrestling with to say, I know I need to do something, but it isn't the number one problem that I've got. That's one of the challenges that I think people have got is how is it being baked into the business DNA, not as oh, by the way, can someone pick up this over here? And I'm doing a disservice to a lot of businesses. But you also have a C suite, excuse me, you also have a C suite who are pushing down, saying, we know we need to do it, but we're not sure how we need to do it. But you have a bottom up approach of not enough people have it as part of their core competency, and there's not a lot of experts in the business. So you've got this push and pull thing going on, and there's a vacuum in the middle where
Yeah.
people are trying to wrestle with the day to day, what they need to do, whilst being told that they need to be more environmentally aware, whilst the consumer's saying you have to do more, whilst legislation isn't forcing them necessarily yet, it's coming to be a better citizen. So those challenges are forcing people to go, okay, I know I need a carbon reduction plan because I'm being told I have to have one. But if I don't, what's the downside?
Yeah.
Like It's like going to a PT and saying, "Yeah, okay, I'm going to go to the gym. Here's my PT. Here's my fitness plan. I just didn't do it.
Right.
Okay. Well, next week, could you try harder? Until there are penalties or until there are massive benefits that are identified, and there seems to be more and more positive data talking about sales uplift, profitability, staff engagement, staff loyalty, staff attraction, all being based around you being a good business. Until that becomes really baked in to the fabric of business, it will continue to be an afterthought. And we could talk about what's happening in the US
Right.
slightly. I don't particularly want to get political on it, but on the one hand, you've got let's put more rigs in the oceans or into land. Let's rip up wind turbines. It's not the solution. Over here, we had the Daily Telegraph telling everyone that the whole issue for Heathrow closing down last week was because of a desire to try and get to net zero. So there's this kind of scaremongering, yet
Yeah.
we've also have the 47 president telling us that we should all buy Tesla. So it's complex.
Yeah. Great. So walk us through how Skoot Eco addresses these challenges. What makes your approach unique?
I mean, unique selling propositions and whether they're the most overused terms as to new unique. I think because we come at it from a let's make it simple, let's make it easy, let's make it addressable today. We come at it not from a let's be a big consultancy that gets paid for doing lots of consultancy. We approach it from let's do something today. I mean, I have a fundamental issue with the 1.5 degrees kind of headline that we should be addressing. I can't control the thermostat in my house. Like, it's too hot, it's too cold. And we're asking people to really focus on the thermostat of the world. Unachievable. Like, how do you want me to change the world's temperature? So we have to break it down into the, nudge theory approach that do something small. It might be wrong, but it's better than doing nothing. And that approach is sometimes at odds with the SBTI approach on different elements, or, businesses wanting the full plan in place before they do something. We don't have time. So
Right.
better, there's an idea of planting one tree is better than no tree. It's not the answer, but what can I do? Said 8 billion people. That's the problem that we've got, and that's the thing that we're trying to do is empower people to take small actions and lots of small actions quickly, rather than the macro approach, which feels too complex. And if I can just focus on me and this idea of we go from selfish to selfless. Some of that is an age thing, some of that is a cultural thing, some of it could be social, religious, etc., etc. But the majority of people are selfish. And I don't mean that in a really negative way and an abusive way, saying you're really selfish, but we are hardwired to look after ourselves first and our families. And then we will seek the community once our families are happy. But the more that the communities come together to think that we could do something, you move from selfish to selfless much, much quicker. And that's what we're trying to do, is get you to understand that being kind and being good actually can be embedded into businesses really easily, from an idea that you could do something, that you can make an impact and a positive impact. And I think the other piece that we do and we really focus on is we're not going to tell you not to do something. I'll go back to the PT. The PT says you should train 4 times a week and you shouldn't have any cheat meals and these are wasted calories and you shouldn't
Right.
drink and you should get sleep and da, da, da. No one does it, really. The PT doesn't say, you know what, Alexander, you're fired. I can't work with you. I mean, they do and it's really bad. What you do is you set a framework, you try and show what good is, and you get people to do a little bit at a time.
Yeah.
That's what we try and do, because if you make it unachievable, if you tell people it's not good enough all the time, what do you build? You build a culture that I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I can't make a difference. But actually, we all can make a difference. We can all, we're not saying don't fly, we're saying understand the impact of you flying. The highest carbon emissions of any hotel in the world are in, or hotels are in the Maldives. They're about 106, 180 kilos a night. So what do? Let's not go to the Maldives. They're really bad for the environment. Well, if we did that, we would destroy the Moldavian world because
Right.
the whole thing would implode. So what we should be saying is, okay, I know that if I'm lucky enough to go to the Maldives, that I should be in a hotel that is thinking about being more sustainable, that maybe is regrowing, the reefs. Where I fly, I should be countering my emissions. I can reduce them as much as possible. Okay, I'm not going to turn left on the plane. I will reduce my emissions as much as possible, and what's left, I will support projects that do good. And that is a much more pragmatic approach than I think a lot of businesses.
Right, right. And when you talk to potential clients, what's the biggest misconception they typically have about what you do?
I think I think it's, as I said before, what difference can I make? There's
Mhm.
a sense of I'm not going to make a difference. It's someone else's fault. And then when you talk to them about what they could do, and then you talk about actually how inexpensive in reality it is, I think people begin to say, okay, yeah, I can do this. And I think where we've lost our way, and if you go back to what brands used to do, I'm a massive believer that brands have a fundamental part to play in the building of
Right,
society. That they don't just come in and take labor and build a factory and use that labor and then the goods go somewhere else. I'm a massive believer that businesses are responsible for the community they have around them. The schools, they should be investing in the schools around them, the green spaces, back to the old sort of days of businesses and factory owners making the towns good for the people because you get better staff and happier staff. And I think that we've lost our way in thinking about ESG. We were talking about CSR for a long time. And I think we've got to get back to humans. Okay, we love animals. Put a picture of a dolphin. Everyone loves a smiling dolphin, hates a shark, looks aggressive. We don't just need pictures of, children being saved in developing countries. We're helping turn some beautiful schools in Tower Hamlets that have got very small playgrounds. And with Addison Lee and Earthwatch, we've been into the schools, and the children are designing gardens that are going to be built in their schools, that to understand biodiversity, to protect those grounds, to understand CO2 emissions and the beauty about urban spaces. Okay, yes, the amount of CO2 being taken out is very, very small, but the impact that that project can have on those kids in understanding those things is quite amazing. And watching the Addison Lee guys on site, and we're going in a couple of months to build it. So we've been in, the kids have designed it, they found the location, and then we go back and they build it. That's such an amazing thing to do. And that's what I hope we can join back up, this idea that people are the reason in the main that we want to do this, because
mhm.
restoring communities, getting awareness, protecting them, you know, I was at a talk the other week and someone said, oh, the world's dying. Kind of went, no, it's not.
Yeah.
The world's not dying. It's not going anywhere.
Right.
We might be dying. We might be going somewhere. And I think it's an interesting thought. If we can humanize it for our local communities, I think we'll get much more buy-in.
Right, right. And could you share a specific success story of a client who saw significant results using your solution?
Yeah, so we've just been doing some. I won't name them, but I named one there. That at the Addison Lee, the idea of the social impact, the idea of doing good, the idea in those communities. That's a very simple approach for us in doing something. For good energy, we supply all and there's debate around carbon offsetting, but good energy do have natural gas um, for their customers. And therefore, what we do is we work on these amazing projects on cook stoves and biogas, whereby the community in Kenya, we've installed them. They are turning the waste from food waste and sort of the cows into gas that then enables the villages to cook. And therefore, the consumer here has the cleanest, greenest gas they can have. And in Kenya, we have an amazing project whereby all those carbon emissions, they are counted, but they're also doing a lot of good. And then we've been helping a number of professional services businesses around the ability to get CDP and get accreditation and carbon reduction plans. I think I suppose the fourth area that we're doing a lot in sport and stadium, so Coventry Building Society Arena, the stadium, there's a sense that how could I do something? So one of the products that we've got, Eco Contribution, we've got this in hotels with people like De Vere and Green Stays and Green Weddings. But at football stadiums, I think it's really interesting that 5p from every single beer that's
Yeah.
sold
Mhm.
comes to us to do good. That's a really simple mechanism of doing good by micropayments, by sweeping something. And if you talk to most people, they're like, oh, it's really complicated. I don't know what to do. I don't know how we'll fund it. Just these small eco contributions that go in a hotel room, a wedding, to do good is really, really powerful.
Okay. And for example, when clients come to you and talk about carbon emissions, what are their typical primary concerns about it?
I think I would say it's really interesting because this odorless, colorless gas that's killing it is going to kill us.
Yeah.
No one knows what it is. So when we talk to people, they go, one, I need to understand my carbon emissions. I don't know how to do it. I don't even know what they are. I don't even know where they come from. So going through the scope 1, 2, 3 emissions, there's I need to do something. How do I identify my emissions and helping people on that and doing it really simply? I think there's also a sense of how do I reduce them and what actually are they? So
Mhm.
back to this idea that people say it's all businesses' fault. Well, when we work with a lot of service-based businesses, we know that broadly speaking, it's about 1.8 to 2 tons a person for a service-based business. And when we say to people, well, actually, you do know in your personal life, you're responsible probably between 10 and 12 tons.
Yeah.
And they go, sorry, what? I don't understand what that means. And when you say, well, 1 ton is a 10-meter ball that you are responsible for and it is above your head at your house or your flat, and that kind of relatability is one of the things that people don't understand. And we've spent a lot of time talking about calories for the last 20 odd years. No one knows how a calorie is generally made. You say,
Yeah.
what is a calorie? It's the thing for foods. And how do you calculate a calorie? It's in the food and you kind of measure it. So, and every day we talk about calories. Every day we talk about calories, yet we don't know what they are or how they're made or where they're from. Yet we're now talking about this new odorless, colorless thing and telling people that they need to reduce. So therein lies a big problem for businesses. So that's where we try and make it relatable when we say, did you know that a 3-course meal is about 8 kilos? Well, one mangrove tree, a sapling in its first year, will only counter or sequester about 6 kilos. So that's
Okay.
one meal, and that's a tree.
Yeah.
That's the context. And people go, okay, shit. That's generally what they end up doing.
Looking at the broader industry, what key trends are you seeing?
I think the trends emerging now. There's a lot around direct air capture, and there's a lot of hype and talk about biochar, and alkaline and blue carbon, and there's a huge amount of
Yeah.
talk because it's exciting and it's new.
Hmm.
That's what people are talking about. Fortunately, the volumes that those kind of technologies are doing and the cost is really, really high. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be pursuing them, but there's a danger that people think that technology will save the world.
Hmm.
The scientists are going to save the world. It's not worth worrying about because someone's going to come up with something that eats carbon. Someone's going to come up with something that removes plastic from the Great Pacific garbage patch. I don't need to worry about it. So there is a sense of excitement in the industry around where it's going. There's a sense of regulation that's coming in, accountability, and people know about a lot of the issues that people like Vera and Gold Standard, you know, people are questioning what's been going on and overclaiming. But I think there's a sense of those future technologies are coming, but not quick enough, really. And I think what we have to do is, as I am an expert in this, if there are experts, that we have to do something today. And that's the piece. We can't wait for three,
Right.
5 years to do something in technology. And technology may do it quickly, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we should just wait for the solution. And it's a bit like hoping that there's a cure for cancer and therefore I don't need to worry about what I eat or drink, or I
Yeah.
can smoke and it's fine. I don't need to worry. That's quite foolhardy to think that someone else is going to solve the world's problems. And I just don't think they are.
Okay. And how are these trends affecting how businesses operate in your space?
I think the businesses are massively affected by global market trends and macro trends and geopolitical trends. And that's why I didn't really want to politicize it. But I think what's happening, in the US at the minute, I get it. I fundamentally get it. It's not about people, politicians, not believing that climate change is a problem. It's fundamentally around the economy and giving people jobs and short termism and political bounce and getting re-elected and proving that you're a savior, not is there a problem. And I think those cascade down, and I liken it to, I'm here in the UK and global, we have the Daily Mail that has a lot of great articles. The problem is with media, they love to hang on to a headline as clickbait. So on Monday, red wine is great for curing heart disease. On Tuesday, red wine gives you a brain tumor.
Hmm.
On Wednesday, it kind of causes diabetes. And on Thursday, you should drink red wine and white wine and rosé wine all at the same time. And that,
Yeah.
helps you run faster. And every day there's a different headline about where the industries are going as a clickbaity. Net zero is a waste of time. In London, EV charging, EV congestion is coming in on Christmas Day this year. That's going to cost people £5,000 if you drive into town. Blah, blah, blah.
Hmm.
That's the problem. The media are just trying to sell newspapers, and it's unsettling for the common everyday business person who is unsure with actually
Yeah.
what they should believe or not believe. And well, if the US is drilling, well, why shouldn't I be drilling? If the US is saying wind turbines are rubbish, should they not be? Well, if Canada's chopping down trees and then the US are going to chop down trees because they're cheaper, trees aren't a problem.
Right.
That's, I think, the fundamental issue that we've got in that media landscape. And then I think there's a lot going on around legislation and being forced to understand your carbon footprints and do something about it. And I think that will help right the ship a bit. I think, what's happening in the Middle East and, Dubai and being forced to disclose and understand your emissions, I think that can only be a good thing. And the more that businesses have to publish an impact report, the more that becomes in the human psyche that, can I read your impact report as a business? The more that you're forced to be a good citizen, I think, and held more accountable.
Right. 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 And in your opinion, what do you think most business owners are getting wrong when they're trying to address this specific problem?
It's Monday, so I'm not feeling too jaded. So I'm going to say that they're not getting it wrong. I think, yeah, the quest for profits, and this is why I like B Corp, because fundamentally, are businesses getting it wrong? No, I think they're really, really struggling with actually where to focus. But there are simply three things to focus on: people, planet, and profit, or people, planet, and performance. It's really, really simple. And they're not exclusive. They're really tightly bound together. And there's a Venn diagram in the middle where they come together, and that's the beauty and the beautiful brands that get that going well. And I think that's the piece that businesses get pulled in one of those three, and they you know, probably the biggest mistake they make is they worry too much about getting it wrong, as opposed to celebrating that they've done something and got it right and leaning into being good, because they're petrified, I think, a lot about greenwashing, being held accountable. I haven't got my act together. And I think as a marketeer, that's one of the fundamental issues that I was talking on a podcast yesterday. I really hate is this idea that that brands, companies create a purpose-led marketing campaign,
Yeah.
but in their heart and their DNA, they haven't got their house in order. So they're using marketing to say nice things, but it should come from the brand DNA. You should
Hmm.
want to be a good citizen. You should want to have a good company. And that isn't necessarily always at the expense of profit. It's not. And those three things together mean that you can have a beautiful business celebrating the fact that you get it wrong, being honest and vulnerable, but
Right.
you're trying, that you are really trying to do the best you can and humanizing that rather than hiding behind faceless BS and coming out and saying, you know what, we're trying. But it's
Right.
really difficult because what would you like us to do? If we do this, we have to increase our price by 50%. If we do this, we have to let staff go. What would you like us to do? Because we have
Hmm.
to make hard choices. And that sense of, oh, no, we don't, is definitely the wrong approach.
So, what advice would you give to business owners who want to stay ahead of these changes?
I would say just start, do,
Hmm.
lean in. It's not going away.
Right.
It may go away on your tenure. It may go away because someone else is going to pick up the problem, but it's not going away. So you can either bury your head in the sand and avoid it, or you lean in and you run staff training programs and webinars and you get people to step up every day, become a bit better, a bit more awareness, a bit more understanding. Harness the eco and ESG champions in your business. That they, in every business, as soon as you say, hey, we're thinking about doing this social impact project, it's amazing how many people go, oh, I didn't tell you, I do that at the weekends.
Right.
So
Right.
leaning into it, finding out who's an immediate hand raise, and not just who would like to do more, who thinks we should do more. Yes.
Right.
No, who is doing more and who wants to do more. So you take the best in class, you begin to champion those people, and you do. And you admit that you're not perfect and you don't know all the answers, and it's really complex and challenging. And, we're on it together and we're doing something because doing something is better than doing nothing.
Okay. So, as you wrap up, what's next for Skoot Eco? Any exciting developments on the horizon?
Yeah, I'm not going to say what I said on the one yesterday when I was messing around about, we're just about to launch this new oil rig, and that's not what we're doing. Uh, for us, a lot of what we're doing around professional services, we've got this amazing sort of product and service that's really addressing some of the big issues around professional services, accountants, lawyers, estate agents that we're really excited about, that we're doing quite a lot in that space and how we can help not only those law firms and accountancy firms, but also their customers and leaning into that. So that's really exciting. We're doing a lot in the sport and event space
Okay.
that is also quite incredible, helping, closing the gap between what the business is doing and what the fan wants or what the customer wants to make it much more cohesive as a fan engagement vehicle. And I think that's incredibly exciting because it feels once again back into the binary. Is either the fan wants something but doesn't know what they're getting, or the event business or the sport business is doing something. So
Hmm.
putting those entertainment things together, hotels, hospitality, we're doing a lot in that space as well because it's really exciting and interesting. So I think across the different sectors, it's great, but also leaning in more and more into the social impact projects, not just the environmental projects, because the social impact projects, I think, you know, do so much for a business that makes them feel really good for, we're looking at actually seeing whether or not, back to the accountancy, whether or not we can help people from different backgrounds get involved in the accountancy world and how we can help modularize that. And that's very different to an environmental project or putting a forest in a local town. But that idea of social impact and doing good for people, I think, is really, really exciting,
Right.
and gets people engaged and connected and really hands on.
Right. Right. And for listeners who want to learn more or potentially work with Skoot Eco, what's the best way to get in touch?
Skoot.eco. We've got loads of different pages on the website, skoot.eco, or check me out on LinkedIn, Mark Stringer, Strings London on LinkedIn. We've got what I would say, we've got lots of resources on the website, lots of how-tos, lots of information. We try to keep it, simple for people. So there's lots of buttons on the website to book a call, send us an email, or, as I say, find me on LinkedIn, DM me. No, I don't need a new business agency. But that's the critical piece is thinking about, can you articulate your problem, and we can help you solve it.
Perfect, perfect. So thank you for sharing those insights about you, about your company, and about the whole story. And thank you for this amazing podcast session.
Pleasure. Thank you, Alexander. It's been a great session. I've loved it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. See you in the next episode. Bye.
Okay. Bye bye.